Welcome to another episode of A Pint with Seaniebee. We're in our sponsor's bar. As you know, when we record in New York, we have a sponsor, Stitch Bar and Houndstooth Bar on 37th and 8th Avenue. Come in here, ask for a pint, mention my name to Nick Cohen, the owner, and you'll get a free pint even if I'm not here to enjoy it with you. But I am having a pint today of Guinness with an old friend of mine, a Canadian, the first Canadian to be on Pint with Seaniebee, believe it or not.
That's great.
His name is Collin Douma. Collin is a advertising guy, a guy who has been at the forefront of the developments in digital and new media. He currently works at Hasbro in charge of global media, is that right?
Yeah. Well, at OMD for Hasbro. But
at OMD. OMD is a, what would be called a media independent, I suppose, is that right?
We're the media agency for Hasbro now, but Apple's the biggest client, Apple and McDonald's.
Where in Canada are you from?
Originally I was from this little town called Norwich. It's not the England one, but it is very near London. Not the England one.
Exactly.
And Stratford, not the England one.
Not the England one.
There is a Scotland up the road. I'm not kidding. There's even a Thames River that goes through London in Ontario. So
what was it like growing up there in Norwich?
It was a small town. I spent a lot of time in my youth. You can make $2,000 in a summer by priming tobacco. So
what does that mean?
Well, someone's got to pick it off the plant.
Really?
Yeah, so I worked in the fields mostly when I was a kid.
So you were a kid picking tobacco?
Yeah, priming.
How many days? The priming sounds like just a fancy word for picking, is it?
It is, but it's the word.
And what was that like? Was it like you go to... It was slave labor?
It's basically slave labor. Canadians wised up to how much work it was. You got paid $70 a day. As a teenager, that's enough to keep your car on the road for the year. You know, they would used to hire in workers from different countries. You couldn't get anybody to come out of those fields. It was backbreaking labor. Yeah. So then you had Mexicans started coming. Then it was Jamaicans, and then one year it was Irish. These guys came. They were fantastic guys from Dublin. 5 of them or 6 of them came across. 2 of them were brothers. There was a poster in their university that said holiday/work term.
I can actually hear the conversation at home. You get free smokes.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I get to work in the fields. All the tobacco I could.
We can roll our own.
It's hardly tobacco you can smoke.
No, I know.
And these poor bastards ended up sleeping on the floor of a garage at this farmer's place in Canada. You get paid $70 a day, but you got a bonus of an extra $10 a day. So, but you didn't get the bonus if you didn't finish the season. And you had to pay for your own flight back.
Was it like 12 years a slave where you come in at the end?
Pretty much. It's like 6 weeks a slave.
The one with the small fingers gets the big bonus and doesn't get whipped.
Yeah. Well, it's really unfortunately true.
And so
I did it voluntarily.
And was this just during your summers when you were in school?
Yeah, harvest was first day of August to Labor Day. You had to get as much in before the first frost. And as soon as the frost hit, it was over. Whatever was left. And
what were your folks? Were they working the land, or what was?
No. My dad was police. My mom was a nurse.
Right.
Very blue collar family.
Okay.
He gave that 20 some odd years and quit for a lot of the reasons why.
Was he a Mountie?
No, not that cool.
Right,
he was a town cop in Woodstock.
Okay.
A townie. He had a good career, but I think he kind of ended up running away. Same reason that most of us do in their 40s. So you become aware. And then you're like, fuck this, and you split.
One time around.
Yeah.
So where did he run to?
Yeah, he just odd job guy. He became Kramer. He delivered water to the Indian reserves, worked in a flower place, not a store, but like a greenhouse, growing flowers. He just was all over the place. And he just moved. I just moved him, actually, last summer to the East Coast, Nova Scotia, where he and my mom are now retired and looking at the ocean every day. So,
right.
That's a good spot for him to be.
Nice up there. Cold, but nice. Were you conscious when you were younger of coming from a blue-collar background that it was... Was there any time in your life when you went, I could get out of here?
I've always sort of followed what's interesting. I never had a career plan. I still don't.
Yeah, that's a common thread through a lot of my guests.
Exactly, yeah. I was very aware that I didn't want to stay in the area because the only future would be some sort of manufacturing job, which I would have to change every couple of years as the factories moved around. Most of my friends from that era are still there doing that. Yeah. And so for me, it was more like get to Toronto. If you can get to Toronto, then you can find your footing and then figure out what you really want to do.
It's interesting you say a lot of your friends are still there. And I have the same thing. I have a little village called Cabinteely south of Dublin. And I didn't leave till I was 28. And the worst people in the world were those who had gone away and would come back at Christmas, and it was a bit like the Iceman cometh, And you'd be in the pub and this guy would come in and go, why are you not in Chicago or something? You go, fuck off, dude. Just don't come home if you don't want it. And I was really conscious that you don't go home and be that dick.
No, don't want to be that guy.
I also look at a lot of my friends. I couldn't raise a family. I know you have a family, but I couldn't raise one. I just wasn't my speed. I didn't want to do it, and I wanted to see the world. And it's horses for courses. And I'm fully respectful of a lot of my friends who raised 10, 5, 6 children, whatever.
Sure.
It is.
10?
And
busy guys.
I don't know who that is. That was the local girl.
They have condoms.
So you went to just college to Toronto, did you?
I went to sort of an art school in Ottawa. I studied animation, and it was cartooning and scene design. I wasn't really good at it. I think you have to be honest with yourself.
The other thing to say about that is that you look back on the time of looking at a job like cartooning, or in my case I was vaguely interested in comedy, and I did a bit of stand-up in Dublin. But you realize as well, yes, you're not good enough, but also it's really hard.
It's really hard.
It's like, if I had to look back today, I'd probably go, I should have stuck at it because I was scared of it because it was so hard.
Yeah.
But I'm very in awe of the people who are journeyman comics or journeyman artists or cartoonists who just said, this is what I'm going to do. And you have to really love it. It's like anything.
You do. That's the trade-off.
You get found out.
If you do get found out. If it's not really you believe me, the world will know. And when I hit the reality of a bigger city and my talents weren't the best in the area anymore, in this area, sure, I could draw a great drawing.
The inside is true. You realize in your heart that you're not good enough.
Yeah. But that's okay, because you got to find your thing, whatever your thing is.
I was interested as well that you seem to be one of those people who could feel it coming, could feel something with the digital thing. Because even in 94, we didn't have... We had basic internet, but that was it. It was squeaky modems, and it was all that.
It was really. A buddy of mine had an Atari computer with you put the phone on it. It was a modem where you quite literally took the receiver off the Sparky, put it on there, and he would dial up somebody, and I'm in Canada, and here's some guy in Africa or probably not Africa, but somewhere else. Yeah. And
Hong Kong.
And Hong Kong, probably a good choice. And he told me just to type a message. This guy's on the other end. And I realized I was typing in real time to the other end. It was fascinating to me that was possible. Yeah. I could see the scale. Yeah. And to me, it was also inevitable that the technology would catch up to the sort of requirements of the graphics, and all the hipsters like the 8-bit stuff from that era now.
But you know what, those magazines as well that used to come out where the magazine itself was just full of code for a game, and people would just spend hours typing the whole code into their BBC.
And those people are all billionaires now.
Probably.
They are. I hate them all. No, I don't hate them because they found their thing.
I remember one time I had a cassette tape, and I played it. There was a cassette tape that used to have code and squeaks, and I just put it up to the speaker of a computer and pressed play, but this is not going to work. And it did work. Yeah, and suddenly Defender was in the computer. What the hell did that happen?
Yeah. And you can do that with U2 now on your iPod. Apparently it shows up too.
I know, even with that asking. The other side of you, though, is you're still a painter and you're also interested in steampunk. Being interested in steampunk is interesting because a lot of people don't know what it is. I only have a vague idea. What is that?
It's another one of those sort of nerdy subcultures. I think Jules Verne or the Nautilus. It's the easiest way. Most people are familiar with that. Jules Verne wrote in the Victorian era about a nuclear submarine. The thing hadn't been invented yet. This thing that could survive for months underwater, was self-reliant on its power. It didn't have to come up for diesel or anything. And submarines were even back then just a dream. They weren't a reality. And so they were very brass and ornate and Victorian.
A lot of pipes.
A lot of knobs and whistles and steam, usually steam powered. Sort of like an alternate history where, for the most part, the gasoline engine was never invented.
Right.
So there's a great deal of fiction written around this, and a great deal of...
I read recently, again, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, which is a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, perfect.
Mental. He hits the wrong button towards the end and ends up like a trillion years into the future at the end of time.
Bit of a frown.
Yeah, I know. But what was interesting to me was, I don't know when it was written, maybe 1900s, early whatever 20s. I don't know exactly. I should know that, but it felt that it was, you could, when you trace back through to some of these books, maybe the Jules Verne stuff, you can actually see an idea that is mutated but has come somewhere, and you can trace it back to these things. Is that part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, people hold their iPhones and their Samsungs or whatever, and it's a tricorder. It's not that different. People read science fiction of that era. It was Jules Verne. It wasn't like classic literature then. It was nouveau.
I read an interesting article about the theory of whether or not we're going to go through a period of stagnation and depression based on the fact that even though we feel like we're in a very innovative period of time, that we're actually not. And that, if you take over the last 200 years, there's been 5 things that have been important, or maybe 6. There's been light, there's been the engines, there's been internal sewerage,
right?
There's been the computer.
The plow.
That we're actually just taking. If you take the difference between when a wheel was invented and when the motor car came out, or when electricity was invented and the light bulb, it's a 30-40 year period, and that we're still dabbling in this area, but we still have the specter of inequality, climate problems, I don't know, dodgy politics, and going on around us. One argument says that the human mind and condition is now in a place where it has the resources to think its way into interesting new areas, and the other says, well, other things are just going to make things worse and worse. Where do you feel on optimism versus pessimism?
I'm a bit old school in the sense that I don't think that technology is going to solve our problems. I think we are in a depression. The state of things is depressing.
Yeah,
and I agree. One of my favorite guys right now is Neil deGrasse Tyson. You ever listen to him?
Well, I watched his remake of Cosmos, which is brilliant.
I love this guy.
It's brilliant to see Cosmos remade with technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and apparently he was a protege of Carl Sagan in the first place.
That's right.
I've seen him speak a few times. Living in New York,
he's very upbeat.
Very upbeat, and also he's sick of the stupid. He's sick of the war on intelligence. I think that's really what the problem is. I think there's an outright war on intelligence.
Yeah.
And there used to be a respect for being able to accomplish a trade, to be really good at it.
Yeah.
To be able to
be smart.
To be smart, yeah. And so there's sort of a negativity around hipsters, like, they're trying too hard. But I kind of respect that at least they're trying to understand that sort of craft side. I don't mind paying $5 for a bottle of water if they meant that they cleaned it with a way that didn't wreck the world with bleach or something, or that buying a $10 bar of soap if it meant that I'm not destroying my house or my kids' health by using it. That's the kind of thing where I feel like the economy and our own happiness has to shift towards a little bit more. I don't think it's going to get better with the globalization. I think it's the corporations are just getting started, because they're starting to see the scale. So I don't think it's good news.
Well, I think
terribly depressing.
I think we've moved. I'm more in alignment with you. One of the observations I have is that we have a situation where if you're not saying what's politically correct and you're challenging thinking in certain areas, you're a bigot or you're a racist or you're whatever.
Right.
And so you are shut down by regressive leftism, which is this idea that a great example is Islam. It's like no one mentions Islam. It's not. Islam's a peaceful religion,
right.
But it's not really. If you look at it, and also Islam has a bunch of tenets that say, if you do this, you will go to heaven and paradise.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing a huge amount of Islam coming out
right.
from Islam saying, hey, we're going to try and shut these down. Sorry about all these problems that we're having. I guess it is a minority. But as soon as you put the word Islam in, you're a bigot. As someone said, when they drop the dirty bomb somewhere, whether it's an Islamic terrorist or just a crazy chap from Oklahoma, sorry, Oklahomans who are listening, we'll all be discussing whether transvestites are allowed to use the ladies' toilet. With apologies to all cross-dressing and transvestites and transsexuals who may be listening. But we're not focusing on the bigger issues.
We're not focusing on any issues.
We're not. Yeah, we're kind of in fear of students are able to get, I should say, I'm offended by this book. I'm offended by Huckleberry Finn because of the N word or whatever. It's like, and you want to be a lawyer, you better be bloody thick-skinned and understand what that N word means then and today, and how instead of banning the book because you're a student and you have the internet.
Yeah, and you're sensitive. There's definitely a real problem. For me, the term political correctness is kindness.
That's nice, yeah.
I substitute it.
Yeah.
Oh, you're just making me be politically correct. No, I'm asking you to be kind.
Yeah.
So if somebody says there's a problem with Islam, let's have a conversation. I don't know that that's a problem for a guy like me, but if somebody's coming in like Trump and saying, all Mexicans are rapists, I'm saying it straight. It's not saying it straight. Yeah. You're just being an asshole, and you're trying to incite riots.
It sounds like when you have this discussion about Mexicans in tobacco fields or Islam, you then suddenly get put into Trump's camp. Absolutely not.
No, not
Trump's
at all.
Camp. Trump is spilling bile. He's giving the real bigoted racist Americans permission to voice their racism and their bigotry. But the same thing is when you're trying to have an intelligent conversation, we're on this kind of tenterhook where I love the way you're positioning a political correctness as kindness, because kindness, I think, is probably one of the greatest ways you could go about living your life. Yeah. If you can wake up or go to bed every night and say, I wasn't an asshole, I wasn't being a dick to people, I can look myself in the mirror, I was kind. It's such a beautiful word. And it's the way we live in peace, without getting all right on. It's the way we can all live in peace and harmony together. Yeah. But as soon as you have discussion that comes out, it can quickly degenerate into, this guy's being unkind or he's being politically incorrect. When actually we do need to have some discussions across the planet, climate change, gun control, that are difficult. Yeah. And you have to be a little bit spiky in order to get change happening.
And also recognize that your position at the end of the conversation might not be the same as it started. And I don't know that anybody's willing to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems
of course,
like
the subtext to all this is the great parallel between Canada, where you come from, and America. And what's your view on how Canada has not developed the same symptoms of malaise that maybe exist down in America?
Canada isn't born out of conflict. There's always been trouble, and Canada did horrible things to the natives that were living there before the Europeans, just like Americans did and do.
You have a spiky French, English, Quebec.
There's always been that sort of ongoing challenge. But I think that's a cultural fight. I find it interesting that in Quebec, with the French side, they're very open to the American culture. They're just not open to the rest of Canadian culture, and it creates this really interesting divisiveness. And Quebec came very close to separating from Canada not that long ago. In a referendum, it was 51 to 49 to stay together.
As someone looking in on Canada, which is a place I love and I love visiting there, I think that the whole French thing adds this huge dimension of richness to the country.
It does.
It just adds this kind of, je ne sais quoi.
Okay, imagine the disdain of the average Texan for Mexicans. And where did that come from? And at one point in history, there was a line that had to be drawn between, Texas and Mexico. And I think Quebec has that. However, the difference in Canada is that when the line was drawn, it was more like a bar fight. I mean, the war was short between the French and English. Yeah. But the one difference in where our American history differs with the Canadian history is that the victors didn't kill everybody. That culture was allowed to go on. That wasn't homogenized. It's totally grossly generalized in saying that, but because there's tons
But it's
of
a big generalization when it comes to war.
It is.
The intention of the victor. Quite a lot of the Middle Eastern war that's developing now is against the West. But, what would have happened if, say, Germany had won the war?
Yeah.
And what did happen to Germany because they lost the war? No one went into Germany and raped and pillaged, and they rebuilt it, right? Yeah. So the intention of the person in charge.
Japan and Germany came up pretty good.
They did. What would have happened to Poland and Britain if the Nazis had taken over? Yeah. Very different answer for all the errors, and there were huge errors in Iran and
couple
Afghanistan.
Big ones.
Yeah. But the intention was not to go in with America and just maybe there was oil issues and stuff, but it wasn't to take over the whole country and rape the women and kill people and cause genocide and whatever. It was to say, look, this is fucking out of control, in our opinion. Maybe we're wrong, or maybe we're not wrong.
Take it down. Canada invented the UN peacekeeping force. That's Lester Pearson's sort of thing. The blue helmets and all that. That was a big thing.
Canada and Norway, probably the two best civil rights.
Canada used to be known for that.
Rights,
but then we went through this 10 years of a really horrible government that the previous administration, they stuck their middle finger up to Bush about Iraq. We're not getting involved with that crap. You got nothing on them. And it was the right choice, I think. But Afghanistan was something important because real people, real civilians were getting hurt. So how can we help? And that's the different approach. Where ISIS now, Canada's backing away. And they're saying, even though there's been terrorist attacks in Canada, there's, somebody stormed Parliament Hill and, they had to shoot them dead. It's not
There are these what I would call middle countries that, I would probably include Canada. I would hopefully include Ireland, Norway, some of the Scandi countries that, they seem to, in my view, whatever they're doing, and quite a lot of them are left of centre socialist kind of driven. Michael Moore's new movie, etc. But there is a way of doing it that a lot of these bigger countries haven't really tried properly. And there are examples of countries who have done it quite well. And if you want to try and have an optimistic view, maybe there is something in that there's as someone says, proof of concept.
Right.
Backing on track to you, so you were in college, and then how did you get into the ad game, or what happened?
Well, I just grew up with the internet, so first it was brochures, like brochureware they used to call it. Put up your website for your company. And then it evolved into basic e-commerce. I worked at this little startup shop called Mackerel. We were so cool. We set the trend of going out of business.
It was fishy from the start.
They're very fishy from the start. There were a bunch of art school kids. No, that's pretty much it. There were a bunch of art school kids that came up with something really awesome as a formula and a new sort of model for an agency. They were one of the very first digital agencies. That's all they focused on. It was an era of just art on the internet, trying to figure out what it's for. And you got to eat crow at the beginning and just do what you have to do. But I went with it. I consciously went with that instead of animation. Despite my education, I thought, look, I think this is the future for me. And then the next move for me was advertising. It's just that's what happened. The internet was catching up. Now advertising is like, oh shit, we need to do some ads. So I worked for.
Well, there was that time when people like you were just like couldn't get enough of them because it was like, get people who know about digital,
that's how I got all the jobs.
Write your own shit.
That's true. And you just kind of. So I rode that wave. I admit I surfed that wave for my whole career, and I was just trying to stay ahead of the wave.
But it's not. It's more than that, because when you make that, a lot of the sort of topics we touch on here are career based. Why people made decisions, and a lot of it is. It's kind of hindsight discussion.
Yeah, of course.
But when you're actually in that, say, I'm making a punt on the future being in this area, you're actually getting up every day. You're reading Wired, and you're taking in, you're sponging. And so you are becoming, and you're doing the 10,000 hours. You're becoming an expert in this area. So a lot of people who've been in fields go, well, I got lucky, but like you make your own luck because you live and breathe it.
Banner ads, microsites, emails. I launch a car, they need a banner ad, they need a microsite, they need an email. It was always the same formula. It got boring pretty fast, but it was also comfortable. And I found myself getting way too comfortable. My mind likes to wander, so I ended up digging into the web really deep to find out where I could push the envelope. And Flickr, I think, was the first social site I really saw. And I'm like, holy shit, you can publish on this platform, and you don't need to be an engineer. That to me was a game changer. And so it wasn't long before I quit my job, hoping to land the next gig in that. And all I did was do what you're doing. I started blogging about it. I had a little blog going. The blog's still up, and it hasn't been updated in 5-6 years. But at that time, I updated it, whatever I was learning. And because I was posting what I was learning, people saw me as the expert, even though they knew as much as I did if they read the blog.
Digital archaeologists of the future will
they will dig it up. And it was fascinating. One day, I saw a spike in my numbers from Seattle. Like suddenly somebody in Seattle saw it, and I got like 7,000 views of all my, I don't know how many individuals, probably 500 individuals. Somebody's passing it around in Seattle. And then I got a handwritten letter from Bill Gates inviting me to New York to meet with him and for this round table conversation that he had with a bunch of like Madison Avenue heavy hitters, Jan Leth from Ogilvy and And I was a group creative director sitting in a room full of Madison Avenue giants, and I'm like, holy fuck! And afterwards, I said to the Corbis, the guy who I knew from Corbis, I said, "How did I get here?" He said, "Yeah, I forwarded you around. I was the email flirt or the spike." He said, "You're the only one who's talking about it in the room. Nobody knows what they're talking about." And I'm like, "You think I know what I'm talking about?" But I had everybody fooled. But that gave me the confidence I needed to quit my job and figure out what's next for me.
You came down to New York. We're skipping a few years, but you came down to New York, which is where I met you on the Gillette business with BBD. What was and you just got married and you just had a kid. So what was the transition for you like moving from Canada to America and from Toronto to New York, and what observations have you got there?
If I was going to be totally honest, I think it was at first a mistake to come here because I believed I was coming to some sort of Mecca. Where I was much more creative opportunity because there's less egos involved.
And it's nimbler.
Much nimbler, much more flexible, and there's this sort of grass is greener attitude. Yeah. I realized really quickly that the people on the other end of the phone, if you work in markets and you're calling New York, the people in New York are just as fallible and just as goofy and just as kind of confused as you are. And if they're shouting out orders, really all New York ever wants is solutions to their problems. And you're either a solution or you're a problem. And I find that actually you can appease New York real easily just by going playing along and then doing what you need to do in your local market. And that's a real big insight for me, having worked on both sides now. But moving my family here to I guess maybe the real part of the question was difficult. You can't get paid unless you have a social insurance number. Our social security number in the U.S. And mine wasn't coming. I'd waited 6 weeks and I'd been in the U.S. now 6 weeks and I still hadn't had one, which meant I wasn't getting paid.
This, it must be said, was a transfer, so your old company could have technically still kept paying you, but they didn't.
They could have, but they didn't, exactly, because they're different P&Ls. So I know
the story behind it, and I know there's two things. Oh, it's Sarbanes-Oxley. They're different P&Ls. All excuses by accountants to just fuck with people.
They are.
Go on.
I'm telling you, I was right on the edge of my credit. I was right on the edge of everything. I was stressed out. I'm like, what the fuck? I just do to my family. I had no dollars left to my name. My house was sold. It was all now invested in rent. For God's sakes, whatever I got out of that. When it settled, it was fine.
Right.
It doesn't surprise me that people that have English not as their first language have a hard time integrating into the U.S. because it is a bullshit bureaucratic country.
It is.
Very difficult to crack. So I think there's all these myths about what I thought America was going to be: cheaper healthcare, lower taxes, sort of better lifestyle. None of those have come true. However, now I've been here long enough where I can call New York home. So now it becomes familiar. It's not an alien city anymore. I walk down the streets and I can say hello to 50 people as neighbors, and it becomes a really real
You'd be that
place.
weird guy saying hello to people in the streets.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
Well, I'll tell you, look, I moved into...
Where are you living in New York?
I live in Brooklyn. I live in a place called Clinton Hill. It was known sort of in the 90s as the Black Bohemia. Yeah. Spike Lee, Chris Rock, like those kinds of guys came from that neighborhood. And so I'm whitey moving in. And that's really what happened.
Ad people, isn't
I'm a honky ad guy. I moved into this neighborhood. And truthfully, it's going through a massive gentrification. And that's a really hard thing for people that are living there and they've been there for their whole lives to see the rent shoot through the roof like that. And there's nowhere to go. And I really feel for those people. And you see a lot of migration out of Brooklyn and a lot of the culture leave as well. But also a lot of the violence and a lot of the crap that goes with poverty, right? Yeah. But it's interesting. Rosie Perez still lives in the neighborhood. And it's just, I only say that because she tweeted, and my wife saw this tweet, that she's not liking the tone of the new people in the neighborhood. And I was like, holy shit, like I'm the new people.
Yeah.
And I noticed when I first moved...
There goes the neighborhood, exactly. When I noticed when I first moved there that as a Canadian and the whole sort of racial tension that goes on in the U.S., it's like, it's not my fight. I don't understand the culture and how I'm supposed to behave. Yeah. So I was very stiff walking down the street, and I wouldn't cross the street if there's teenagers or something, but you're very aware, very hyper aware. And then it dawned on me that I was being stupid, that she's right, that I am being standoffish. And so I stopped and I started saying hello. Okay. And that was enough to make it feel like home because everybody said hello back. And before you know it, I'm part of the neighborhood. I was no longer an observer, I was a participant. Yeah. That's really important. What would you say to your son as Finn or your younger self looking back? One of the things we try and tap into here is just what sort of wisdom have you learned? What would be a couple of things that you would say to your younger self or to your boy when he gets old?
I think that you have to watch out for ambition. It's something my dad warned me of and I didn't listen to.
What does that mean?
Ambition is a double-edged sword. My dad was a cop and he was a constable, first-class constable, which is basically entry level for his whole career. Never once accepted a promotion, never once moved up the chain.
Why wouldn't he have accepted a promotion?
Because the further up the chain they get, the more in Excel you get, the further away you get from the craft. He was interested in being a cop because he was interested in helping people.
Okay.
And the higher up in your promotions you get, the less you're going to do that.
What about the logic that you can climb up the ladder knowing what you know about grassroots and make things better?
You have to change the system from one thing. I haven't seen that work yet.
There's my old ideology coming to the fore again. How's that work for you, Sean? Not very well.
Yeah, I don't know.
So ambition is a double-edged sword. So what does the take out of that mean?
The art director, I miss the art director. There was people that I saw as like the 50-year-old art director who I saw as a bit of a loser when I was a younger guy. And I'm like, now I see them as the wise guy. Yeah. Like the one who said, look, I can have a fantastic career being the best art director on the planet and push my craft and push my limits and push design and understand fonts and get deeper into fonts. There's a million places, photography, animation, production, wherever angle you want, music. You can do all of that as an art director. But then when you're a creative director, you're a manager. It's a whole other game.
I had a bit of that. I mean, I had a brief moment at the big boys table and didn't like it at all, back in the day. And, I've pretty much, the industry has spat me out, which I'm okay with. But it's a bit like the Peter principle. You see a lot of people who actually, if they had gone down to their previous position, they would be a far more relevant and worthwhile person to have on the team than now that they are in charge of a department or whatever. So I get that. What other things?
This all is hyper cliche to hear from a guy who's in his 40s or 50s to say this to a younger person, but I do think it'll come if you find the passion, find that thing you're interested in and just riff on it and riff on it. And it's okay. Actually, it's better if it's not what everybody else is doing. Yeah. And I think that culturally, it's more acceptable to be different now than it was when I was younger. Everybody in my town was a hockey player or a farmer and I just was a weirdo in that way. Yeah. But friendly to everyone, so I was no one's enemy. For me, I wasn't really anyone's friend either. For me, it was really about trying to find my place so find your community, find your angle, and just be brilliant at what you do. And honestly, you know it as well as I do, eventually money will come. But that's sort of like the artsy-fartsy in me. And what if it doesn't? I'm kind of like, so what, looking back? You know what I mean? What if it doesn't come? What if you spend your life being a painter? So you don't have a house in Brooklyn or you don't have a $500 shoes. Who fucking cares? Like, honestly, you might have a really great cabin in the woods and you might have wood in the fire. I don't know that it's that different. So the opportunity, I think, for happiness is where I would put in a prediction as well as nostalgia and say that we don't need to change the world. I don't know why everybody feels like they need to. It's a Gen X thing and it makes us cynical because we're not going to be able to. These new people, the young kids, younger than those guys, the younger kids, my kid, I'm just going to say, I don't care if you want to backpack through Europe for 20 years. I don't care if you want to go to college and be a lawyer. I really just genuinely want him to be happy. And so I'm going to tell him to take whatever courses he finds easiest in high school. Not because it doesn't matter what your grades are, because if you find it easy, that's probably where your passion is. If math is nothing to you, holy shit, take math, man. Yeah. You know what I mean? But if it's really hard to you, don't fucking take math.
Math, not meth.
Yeah, math, exactly. Yeah. You see what I mean? Like, for me, I spent all my time in high school in media classes, art classes, music classes, because that was easy to me.
There is an optimisticness to this because the parents of the past pushed children to formality or conformity or careers they can boast to other people about or careers that they know will probably pay okay. Yeah. But what they fail to think is this thing about you're pushing your kid into possibly boredom or possible ennui or possible this whole idea that 25, 30, 40 years ago by they'll wake up and what the fuck just happened and then I'm about to die.
That's the worst nightmare of the world, I think.
That's a good place to end it. Collin Douma, thank you so much for appearing on a Pint with Seaniebee. And we didn't talk too much about advertising. We talked about life, which is what I'm trying to make these more about. So good luck with the future. And we'll have another pint next time in Europe.
Perfect. Thanks, Sean.
Bye.
Cheers.